My name is Mike O'Brien. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Igneous, and we're going to spend quite an in-depth time talking about unstructured data and specifically the management of it. And so for most of the people attending, I would presume there's an understanding about what unstructured versus structured is. But for those that may not be aware, structured data would be things that applications would recognize, or VMs. And so there are plenty of solutions that manage structured data. We are not one. Unstructured data are things that are machine generated. They can be dense, rich imagery from medical capture devices or geospatial surveying and scanning. And so generally it's all those things that you wouldn't find formatted or structured or parsable or searchable or groupable and things of that nature. And so I'm going to start out with what we believe to be a fact, not a premise, that relative to unstructured data, you're not seeing a storage problem. I think part of the issue is that traditional ways of expanding capacity and just storage of it are leading to deeper silos, deeper vendor lock, and deeper challenges visualizing and managing and moving and protecting that data. What you do have, however, is a problem with managing that data, and there are a number of reasons for that. So most people that understand the unstructured data concepts understand it's exploding. And so this is just a brief histogram you may see repetitively through here, but based on the fact that AI, ML, and analysis and machine generated data are driving generally a 30% compound annual growth in the amount of data that we're seeing. The nature of the files that are being stored off are also turning into a higher iteration of small files over a fixed footprint. And so the density of the file structures can create problems as well. And so unstructured data has been around for quite a while. And there are a number of systems and vendors and solutions and approaches to doing that. But the rate of growth, the recursive leveraging of unstructured data, and just the overall lack of visibility and the ability to management is wreaking havoc, honestly, through the enterprises that deal with it. And so typically the issues faced are that over time, you've seen a heterogeneous storage footprint. There's what we call enterprise sprawl, in that all of the backup and the primary storage tiers, tape libraries, disk targets. And so you'll have a number of different vendors in here, typically in an enterprise that's managing reasonably sized unstructured data fields. And the amount of process and capacity that you're throwing at this problem just to gain simple visibility isn't cutting it. And so it's already out of control. The compound growth rates are telling you very clearly that it's going to get much, much worse before it gets better, until you change your practices of at least visualizing and being able to manage it. So there are too many systems and too many vendors providing just a slice. And so there's some pretty good visibility tools, a lot of things around governance and compliance around that layer of solutions. There's plenty of data protection, but not illogically, those solutions around data protection have a very good solution that's scalable and manageable for structured data. Unstructured data, the barn door's been open for a while. And so we're seeing all kinds of failed backups or protection motions. We talk to people that can't tell you how much data they have because they can't see it. And so these are just some examples about how out of control this unstructured data management world has become. And just the simple task that you would think was simple of moving data from one place to another is not as simple as it would sound. You have plenty of vendor-specific silos that you can't, for instance, move from your primary tier to your desired target tier. Maybe you can protect it through replication, but just a simple move. We have clients that have 32 windows open concurrently of rsync just to try and do a day-to-day job. And so another illustration of how unmanageable administering this data is just at the simple levels. And so the tail between the long tooth of this unstructured data market combined with its rapid growth and expansion means that the solutions that were functional before aren't working at today's scale. We talked about one of the brief reasons for that being in just the density of small files in a fixed footprint is wreaking havoc. But we're asking systems that have been around for quite a while to perform at a level that they're just not capable of based on the loads and the nature of the density of these images that they're seeing. And so we'll spend some time digging deeper into that on the technical side as we go along. But suffice it to say that you're not going to be able to keep doing it the same way. You can't just throw storage capacity at the problem. You're creating a deeper silo. You're going to have to start to evaluate heterogeneous system support. Cloud is a perfect example. It's no longer just an on-prem storage game. A lot of people haven't found a viable way to leverage cloud storage, even though it's priced as cheaply as tape. And so we're going to explore and scratch down into the fact that it's actually a very viable storage medium at present.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
This is Ray Lucchese. You want to talk a little bit about the density of small files and how that's changed over time? I guess I don't understand that there are more small files coming out in existence today.
Sure. And so I'll defer some of the depth in that topic to Jeff's later presentation. But essentially, you'll have a file that, let's say you have a terabyte of data. That could be just one image. But in that terabyte of data, you could have 300 small files as well, based on some IoT data, just some other small snippets. And so it's just not a large file size. Same terabyte footprint, if that makes sense.
Okay. So you're just saying a lot more small files are being created than larger files in this.
That's correct.
In this new world.
If you think about a tree structure or having to navigate a directory or move that data, it does start to impart a heavy process on systems that have been around for a while that don't anticipate seeing that. And so there are some architectural dependencies that you'll bump into very, very quickly.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, okay. And so a lot of reasons they're struggling to keep up. We've talked about a lot of them. The very fundamental level is you have to be able to see where it is, and you shouldn't have to move it to be able to see it. You should be able to see it where it sits, no matter where it sits, regardless of whose system it resides on, and that should include cloud, another illustration of a heterogeneous storage environment. You're going to have to be able to protect these things, and we have a number of customers that are, I would describe them well above the medium size. So they're large unstructured data users that are just failing their SLAs for backup. And so I'm actually interested in getting some input from the panel on this. We have a very coarse line of 300 terabyte images trying to back up, between 300 and 500 terabytes that we're seeing failed backup motions and just failed move. It's just the systems seem to all bump into this architectural limit about 300 to 500 terabytes. And we don't have an answer for why that is. And so I'd be interested in your theories as we go along. The other aspects of, if you've got a very rich on-prem environment with predominant single vendors, as you bring on other storage vendors, of which cloud is one, those vendor tools don't always work with it. Typically they don't. And so we're going to have to think about just treating storage as storage, not a particular vendor's systems. And there are plenty of pressures to see workflows and targets for storage function across a heterogeneous footprint. And that's going to pick up speed. I can promise you it will not be slowing down. And so again, the premise that cloud is cost prohibitive, it really isn't. And so we'll dig deeper into these aspects as well. And so simple statement, this is actually from a Gartner analyst, is that the data center is just fundamentally not the center of your data anymore. And so it's not just a heterogeneous footprint, it's a topological issue as well. The data is spread out, the consumers of it are spread out. Often it's a global infrastructure. And so for some of the larger tech folks that use Igneous, they're literally, it's a follow the sun motion for working on the data. And so there's plenty of movement, plenty of backup iterations, and all kinds of other aspects that get into the fundamental need, again, to see it, to move it effectively, and to protect it well. So very clearly, you can't manage what you can't see. And this is just a quick look at the data discover component, which is our visibility, discover and index tool. And so the fundamental premise of Igneous is we're trying to enable the storage that's already out there, bring cloud in a meaningful way, and give a very simple, scalable, functional method to move forward in managing this unstructured data with just software. And so for those of you that have followed Igneous historically, we did have an appliance solution that we brought our own storage. We just made the conscious choice not to be just another storage vendor or create another silo. And so we've elevated to functioning with all on-prem NAS, any cloud, and any workflow. And so we're providing the market with a way to visualize, which is what this screenshot showing you, our discovery tool, index, and be able to move and protect that data regardless of its source, which vendor owns that source footprint, or what target you would like to back it up. And so, for instance, we can back up an Isilon primary system to a NetApp archive tier, or the cloud. That same image can go anywhere. And so that's just a simple illustration. And so what this UI is showing you is that we're traversing all of the NAS systems, and we're taking an inventory and indexing, a very rich index. In fact, you can drill down through this interface straight to an individual file through this discovery tool, but we're allowing the enterprise to set its own definitions and thresholds for what is warm data or hot data, what's lukewarm or medium temperature data, and what's cold. What's cold that should not still be resident on your expensive primary tier at $300 a terabyte a year or even more, so that you can reduce some of the clutter and make the more performant primary tiers available to other workflows and that should bear the expense for that storage. And so some of the lowest hanging fruit in the enterprise, honestly, for tuning their storage environment is just to identify where that cold data is that's choking up your expensive tiers and move it off to an archive tier in either a compressed or an uncompressed format. And when you do that, keep it available in an index so that it remains in your inventory and discoverable and searchable.
Mike,
Yes.
So this UI is showing what, 51 petabytes of data that hasn't been accessed in a year? Is that what it's telling us?
Correct. In fact, statistically, we find that about half of the data is cold, over a year old, even on those expensive primary tiers. And so it's a really important illustration of the very fundamental things that you have to at least have visibility and facets of not just where those files sit, but when's the last time it was accessed? What's the last time it was modified? And so you can set a number of different facets into your definition of cold. And it gives you a further agility to automate and recommend movement of that data, or at least some activity to tune your storage tiers to make them, well, efficient and cost compliant to its appropriate use case or workflow.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So fundamentally, it starts with visibility, and here speed matters. And so you don't want to take, it's a 51 petabyte environment. And so you guys can imagine at normal scan rates, it can take upwards of a month or a little longer to get complete navigating those trees to visualize that. And so again, I'll defer to Jeff to how fast comparatively that we do these things relative to other tools in the market. But Igneous started purposefully on recognizing this unstructured data scale and speed and support for a heterogeneous environment problem, and invested very deeply into the nature of the architecture of the solution so that we can traverse a 51 petabyte environment in days, not months. And so we'll get into some benchmarking a little bit, but I want to emphasize that with the scales that we're beginning to see, the growth rates, speed and scale matter. And that's a number of illustrations beyond just a failed SLA for a data protector or backup motion. And so you can't use the data you can't find. We've just released another version in here that allows you to search specifically through the index to find your data and to group it. And so all of the follow-on actions behind visibility are where the rubber meets the road. It's not enough just to provide visibility. You also have to provide meaningful parsing of the visibility and actionable move and protect sets behind that. So there are some keys to an efficient management of unstructured data. And so I'll say it again, it's not a storage problem. Part of the issue that we're trying to untangle is that people have just thrown capacity, vendor-specific capacity, in 80% saturation of availability, and it's gone deeper into some of the limits. And there are folks that are pretty well tied up with the tools that they have and their inability to see or even move or take action on the data. And so you have to be able to rapidly discover what's out there. It doesn't matter where it is or whose system it's on. You should see everything very, very quickly. Timely information is important. You're going to have to support a heterogeneous storage environment, again, non-vendor specific things, which includes cloud. So essentially what Igneous is submitting is that we're democratizing storage. Your ability to manage shouldn't matter about where it sits, again, or whose things it's on, and performance is a very key aspect. Your scalability that keeps you from these failures we're seeing and cleaning up behind quite frequently in the market. And so the scale is an important aspect as well. And so you're going to have to be able to understand what you have to optimize your storage and the cost. That's what we're all being asked to do collectively in the enterprise. And so fundamentally, you're going to have to simplify things. So the old limited, expensive, complex, and manual methodologies are no longer functional. We've talked about a number of reasons why. And so what the market is requesting is an agile, cost-effective, simple, and automatable method for visualizing, moving, protecting data, and generally optimizing workflows. So it's all about the workflow. The data can't do anything for you if you're not analyzing it or if you can't access it. And so enabling those workflows to traverse across vendor silos and access data where it sits, it's a very critical aspect of moving forward effectively. Making better use of cloud, we'll talk about this in further detail. And so it's not just any NAS system you're going to have to be able to interoperate over. You're going to have to make sources and targets for the heterogeneous cloud environments, just like a heterogeneous on-prem. And so it's a hybrid planet. And so we may delve into high performance compute and some of the significant advantages the on-prem systems have still over the cloud in scalable file systems, for instance, and the sub-second latencies that are required for some of those environments. But cloud's still a very viable storage medium, particularly in that it's cold tiers. And if you leverage them properly or priced at tape prices, it does quite a bit to make budgets more available for where the investment should be in the HPC and some of the movement. So we're saying that at exabyte scale, you're going to have to democratize that storage, enable all workflows across those aspects, any NAS, any cloud, any workflow, and often you can see a 50% reduction in storage through various means of moving them off your primary compressions rather than replication, expiry, things of that nature. And so you have to make it simple, fast, and easy, any to any. 40% more efficient in our backup motion than a replication of Isilon or NetApp. That's meaningful. And so if you're in an old replication environment, you're having to throw the capacity at that problem. And so Igneous is statistically, and we can get into some of the proof points later, as I mentioned, rather than replicating, when Igneous backs up an image, the image that we're applying to your archive tier is 40% more effective than a replication, and it can be written anywhere, not just into a vendor-specific library. And so it's quite a bit less man hours and inspections and cleaning up behind those motions as well. And so again, in summary, we're submitting that you haven't had a storage problem for quite a while. In fact, you've contributed to the problem by just throwing storage at it. You absolutely have a data management issue. And so you're going to have to get a hold of the reins and start thinking differently about how to navigate these things moving forward. And so you're going to have to discover, protect, and be able to move or flow your data from any NAS, any cloud, and any workflow.